The crystal halls of the Galactic Council trembled with an energy that hadn't been felt in over 3 millennia. Ambassador Zephyr of the Altarian Empire stood before the massive holographic display, her 6 arms gesticulating wildly as she addressed the assembled representatives from across known space. The translucent blue skin of her species rippled with barely contained emotion. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones that made Altarian speech so distinctive. "We stand at a crossroads that will define the next era of galactic civilization. The Void Swarm has returned." A collective shudder ran through the chamber. Species that had fought bitter wars against each other for millennia suddenly found themselves united by a single, overwhelming fear. The Void Swarm, ancient, relentless, and utterly destructive, had last appeared during the time of the Old Kingdoms, when civilizations were young and magic still flowed through the stars. "Impossible," growled Commander Thok of the Ursine Confederation, his massive bear-like frame rising from his seat. "The swarm was destroyed. The histories are clear. Our ancestors sacrificed everything to ensure they could never return." Ambassador Zephyr's primary hands manipulated the holographic controls, and the display shifted to show a sector of space near the galactic rim. What they saw made even the most hardened military commanders step back in horror. Entire star systems were simply gone, replaced by an expanding sphere of absolute darkness that seemed to devour light itself. 3 weeks ago, the mining colony of Zerion Prime went silent, Zephyr continued. "When our scout ships investigated, they found this. The swarm has not only returned, it has evolved. It no longer simply consumes organic matter and technology. It now feeds on the very fabric of space-time itself." The chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives from hundreds of species began speaking at once, their voices creating a cacophony of fear, anger, and desperation. Some demanded immediate evacuation of the rim worlds. Others called for the mobilization of every fleet in the galaxy. A few suggested attempting diplomatic contact, though they were quickly shouted down by those who remembered the old stories. Through it all, one voice remained conspicuously silent. In the far corner of the chamber, almost hidden among the more exotic species, sat a small delegation wearing simple blue uniforms. They were unremarkable in almost every way. Bipedal, moderately sized, with only 2 arms and plain features. Most of the other delegates had forgotten they were even present. "The humans haven't spoken," observed Counselor Vex of the Silicon Collective, her crystalline body chiming softly as she moved. "Perhaps their primitive technology cannot comprehend the magnitude of this threat." This drew a few cruel laughs from some of the more advanced species. Humanity had only joined the Galactic Council 50 years ago, after finally achieving faster-than-light travel. Their technology was considered quaint by galactic standards, their military laughably small, and their homeworld so unremarkable that it wasn't even on most star charts. Ambassador Sarah Chen of Earth stood slowly, her movements deliberate and calm. She was a woman in her 50s with graying hair and laugh lines around her eyes that spoke of a life well lived. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but somehow carried to every corner of the vast chamber. "We've been listening," she said simply, "and we've been calculating." "Calculating?" scoffed Prince Zorath of the Draconian Empire, his scaled hide glittering with embedded jewels. "What could a species that still uses chemical propulsion possibly calculate about a threat that destroyed civilizations when your ancestors were still living in caves?" Sarah smiled, and something in that expression made the more perceptive delegates lean forward with sudden interest. "We've been calculating exactly how long it will take the swarm to reach each of your homeworlds." She activated a small device, and suddenly the holographic display changed. The spreading darkness of the swarm was now overlaid with trajectory lines and timelines. The precision was startling, but what truly shocked the assembly was the accuracy of the projections. "Your computational abilities are adequate," admitted Counselor Vex grudgingly, "but computation will not stop the swarm. We need weapons, fleets, technologies beyond anything currently available." "Actually," Sarah said, her smile widening slightly, "we need something much simpler. We need unity." The chamber fell silent. Unity was a concept that the Galactic Council paid lip service to, but in practice every species looked out for itself first. The idea that they could truly work together seemed almost as impossible as stopping the swarm itself. "Your idealism is touching," said Ambassador Zephyr. though her tone was not unkind. But idealism will not save us from extinction. Sarah touched her device again and the display shifted once more. This time it showed Earth, a small blue marble orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. But the information surrounding it was anything but unremarkable. "This is our homeworld," Sarah said. "Population 12 billion. Military vessels approximately 50,000, mostly in-system patrol craft. Advanced technology, minimal by your standards. Exotic matter reserves none. Psychic potential negligible." The delegates nodded, confirming what they already knew. Humanity was, by galactic standards, utterly insignificant. However, Sarah continued, and her voice took on a different quality. "There's something else you should know about us, something that doesn't show up in your databases or your threat assessments." She paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled representatives of the greatest civilizations in the galaxy. "We've never met a fight we wouldn't take on if it meant protecting what we love." "Ambassador." Zephyr's skin rippled with confusion. "I'm afraid I don't understand the relevance of your species' apparent death wish." Sarah's smile became something altogether more dangerous. "Let me put it another way. The swarm is coming for all of us. You're absolutely right about that. And you're also right that most of our technology is primitive compared to yours. But there's one technology we've perfected that none of you have even attempted to understand." "And what would that be?" asked Commander Thok, though something in his expression suggested he was beginning to suspect. "The technology of working together when everything is on the line," Sarah replied. "The technology of making impossible decisions and living with the consequences. The technology of looking at certain death and deciding to charge anyway." The chamber remained silent as the implications of her words sank in. These species had grown powerful through conquest, through careful calculation, through the accumulation of resources and technology. But they had also grown soft, comfortable in their superiority. "You're suggesting an alliance," said Prince Zorath slowly. "I'm suggesting something more than that," Sarah replied. "I'm suggesting we stop being separate species, trying to survive and start being one, people trying to live." The silence stretched on as the greatest minds in the galaxy tried to process what the human ambassador was proposing. Finally, Ambassador Zephyr spoke. "And if we refuse?" Sarah's expression grew sad but determined. "Then we'll stand alone on Earth and do what we can." "But the offer stands." Because defending Earth was never just about protecting one world. It was always about protecting the idea that no matter how dark things get, someone will always stand up and fight. The vote was scheduled for the next day, but something had already changed in that chamber. For the first time in millennia, the galaxy had a choice that mattered. The emergency session convened at dawn on the Council's homeworld of Nexus Prime. The artificial star that provided light to the massive space station cast long shadows across the assembly chamber as delegates filed in with expressions ranging from determined to terrified. Word had spread quickly through the galactic networks about humanity's proposal, and reactions were as varied as the species themselves. Ambassador Sarah Chen sat quietly in the human delegations section, reviewing reports that had arrived overnight from Earth's deep space monitoring stations. The news was not encouraging. 3 more systems had gone dark during the night, and the swarm's advance seemed to be accelerating. Whatever was driving this ancient enemy, it was growing stronger with each world it consumed. "The session is now in order," announced Chief Arbiter Kalos, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline shell. "We will hear responses to yesterday's proposal from the representative species." The first to rise was General Korath of the Hegemony, a species known for their martial prowess and rigid military hierarchy. His scarred carapace gleamed under the artificial light as he addressed the assembly. "The Koran hegemony has existed for 8,000 years, he declared, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "We have conquered 17 star systems and never known defeat. We do not cower behind alliances when faced with threats." A murmur ran through the chamber. The Korans were among the most powerful military forces in the galaxy, and their participation would be crucial for any unified effort. "However," Korath continued, and the chamber fell silent, "we also do not throw away lives needlessly. Our tactical analysis confirms what the humans have suggested. Separate resistance will result in total annihilation. United resistance offers a possibility of survival." He paused, looking directly at Sarah Chen. The hegemony will join this alliance, but under one condition. We demand proof that humanity can contribute more than just words and wishful thinking. Before Sarah could respond, Ambassador Vex of the Silicon Collective rose, her crystalline form chiming with agitation. This is absurd. Why should we place our trust in a species that barely understands quantum mechanics? Their most advanced weapons are still based on kinetic projectiles. Because, interrupted a new voice from the gallery above, those kinetic projectiles have never failed to find their target when it mattered. All eyes turned upward to see Admiral Elizabeth Morrison of the Earth Defense Force floating down on a personal gravity platform. Her appearance caused a stir. Humans rarely sent military representatives to council sessions, preferring diplomatic channels. "Admiral Morrison," said Chief Arbiter Kilos, his energy form flickering with surprise. "This is highly irregular. The floor is reserved for appointed ambassadors." "With respect, Chief Arbiter," Morrison replied as her platform touched down beside Sarah. "Irregular times call for irregular measures. You want proof of what humanity can contribute? I'm here to provide it." Morrison activated a holographic projector, and suddenly the chamber was filled with tactical displays showing ship movements, resource allocations, and strategic positions. But what drew gasps from the assembled delegates were the numbers, massive numbers that didn't seem possible. "In the 72 hours since the swarm was detected," Morrison began, "Earth's industrial capacity has been converted to full wartime production. We've completed construction of 1,500 new vessels, trained 40,000 new crew members, and developed 17 different weapon systems specifically designed to counter swarm tactics based on historical data." Commander Thok's massive frame leaned forward. "Impossible. Our intelligence reports indicate human industrial capacity could not support such numbers." Morrison smiled grimly. "Your intelligence is based on peacetime production figures. What you didn't account for is what happens when every human on Earth decides that failure is not an option." She manipulated the display, showing manufacturing centers across Earth where normal production had ceased entirely. Car factories were building missile components, textile plants were producing armor plating, and civilian shipyards were launching military vessels at a rate that defied all galactic industrial standards. "Our scientists have been working around the clock," Morrison continued. "Dr. Yuki Tanaka managed to reverse engineer swarm energy signatures from the historical data and develop targeting systems that can lock onto their quantum phase shifting. Dr. Emmanuel, Okafor's team has created armor, plating that actually gets stronger when exposed to the type of energy weapons the swarm typically uses. And Dr. Maria Santos has solved the power distribution problem that has plagued multi-species fleet coordination for centuries." The chamber erupted in excited chatter. These were breakthroughs that galactic scientists had been working on for decades, some for centuries. Ambassador Zephyr raised her primary hand for attention. "These claims are remarkable, Admiral Morrison, but surely you understand our skepticism. Advances of this magnitude typically require years of development and testing." "Under normal circumstances, yes," Morrison agreed. "But we're not operating under normal circumstances. When extinction is the alternative, humans have a tendency to achieve the impossible." She switched the display again, this time showing personnel files, thousands upon thousands of them, scrolling past too quickly to read individual names but slow, enough to convey the overwhelming scope. Every major university on Earth has suspended normal classes and devoted their entire research capacity to this effort. Every military academy has accelerated their training programs. Every factory worker, every engineer, every scientist, and every soldier on Earth is working 18-hour shifts because they understand one simple truth. If we don't stop the swarm here, there won't be anywhere left to run. Prince Zorath of the Draconian Empire stood slowly, his jeweled scales catching the light. "Your dedication is admirable, Admiral. But dedication alone will not defeat an enemy that destroyed civilizations far more advanced than any present in this chamber." Morrison nodded respectfully. "You're absolutely right, Your Highness. Dedication alone isn't enough, but dedication combined with every resource and capability of our allied species might be." She gestured to the tactical displays, which now showed integrated fleet formations with ships from dozens of different species, working in perfect coordination. "We've spent the last 72 hours not just building weapons, but designing a command and control system that can coordinate every ship, every weapon, and every tactical system across multiple species with different technologies, different languages, and different tactical doctrines. Counselor Vex's crystalline form brightened with interest despite herself. The computational requirements alone would be staggering. The processing power needed to coordinate even a small multi-species fleet has defeated our best AI systems. Morrison's smile became genuinely warm for the first time, which is why we're not using AI systems. We're using something much more reliable. Humans who've spent their entire lives learning to work with other humans. The implication hung in the air like a challenge. Every species in the galaxy had developed increasingly sophisticated artificial intelligence to handle complex coordination tasks. But humans still relied primarily on organic intelligence, on the ability of individuals to adapt, improvise, and make decisions based on incomplete information. You're suggesting that human intuition is superior to our computational systems? Asked General Karath, his tone carefully neutral. Suggesting that when everything goes wrong, and it always does in war, you want people making decisions who understand that sometimes the best tactical choice is the one that makes no logical sense at all. Morrison replied. She touched her controls one final time, and the displays shifted to show a single image that made every delegate in the chamber lean forward. It was Earth, but not as they had ever seen it before. The planet's surface was lit not just by cities, but by massive industrial complexes that had sprung up seemingly overnight. Orbital platforms surrounded the world like a shell of metal and energy, and streams of ships moved constantly between the surface and the depths of space. This is our homeworld as of 6 hours ago, Morrison said quietly. 12 billion people who have never seen a void swarm, who had never heard of the Galactic Council until 50 years ago, who still think that the height of military technology is a nuclear weapon. And every single one of them is working right now to save not just humanity, but every species in this chamber. She paused, looking around the assembly at faces that represented the pinnacle of galactic civilization and power. The question isn't whether humanity can contribute to this alliance. The question is whether the rest of the galaxy can keep up with us. The chamber fell into absolute silence as the implications of her words sank in. Finally, Chief Arbiter Kalos spoke. We will proceed to the formal vote. All those in favor of the proposed alliance will indicate their consent now. One by one, lights began to appear on the massive voting board, slowly at first, then with increasing speed until the entire board was ablaze with agreement. The alliance was born. The command ship Unity hung in space like a monument to impossible cooperation, 3 kilometers long and built in just 6 days. It represented the combined technological capabilities of 47 different species, all working toward a single goal. Its hull gleamed with the distinctive blue-white alloy favored by the Altarians, while its weapon systems bore the elegant curves of draconian design philosophy. The engine signature was purely human, chaotic, powerful, and utterly reliable. Captain Marcus Webb stood on the bridge, watching the view screen display the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. Ships from every member species of the newly formed alliance stretched as far as sensors could detect, each one bristling with weapons and hope in equal measure. The sight should have been inspiring, but Webb couldn't shake the feeling that it still might not be enough. Status report, he called out, his voice carrying easily across the bridge where representatives from dozens of species worked side by side at stations that had been redesigned to accommodate everything from tentacles to crystalline appendages to energy beings, all fleet elements. Report ready for hyperspace transition, announced Lieutenant Commander Zara Okafor, her dark eyes reflecting the glow of the tactical displays. The Quran battle groups are maintaining formation discipline, though their commanders are still grumbling about taking orders from a human. Webb almost smiled. 3 weeks ago, the idea of Quran soldiers taking orders from anyone outside their species would have been considered impossible, but the swarm had a way of making the impossible seem routine. Engineering status, Webb called to the aft section of the bridge. All systems optimal, responded Chief Engineer Vex, her crystalline form chiming with satisfaction. I must admit, Captain, your species has a fascinating approach to power distribution, completely contrary to established principles, but somehow more efficient than anything we've achieved. Sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to ignore what everyone knows is impossible, and just try things until something works, Webb replied. It was a very human philosophy, and one that had been met with skepticism by most of their alien allies until the results started speaking for themselves. Incoming. Transmission from the Altarian Science Division, announced Communications Officer Thren, his 6 arms dancing across his control panel with practiced efficiency. They're reporting completion of the quantum resonance mapping. Webb turned to the massive holographic display at the center of the bridge, where Ambassador Zephyr's image materialized. Despite the formal setting, she looked exhausted. The Altarians had been working around the clock to understand the swarm's new capabilities, and the strain was showing. "Captain Webb," Zephyr began, her harmonic voice carrying undertones of worry. "We've completed our analysis of the energy signatures from the consumed systems. The news is troubling." The display shifted to show a 3-dimensional map of the affected space. The sphere of darkness that marked swarm-consumed territory had grown significantly, even since their departure from Nexus Prime. "The swarm isn't just consuming matter and energy anymore," Zephyr continued. "It's consuming the fundamental structure of space-time itself. Each system it destroys makes it stronger, and that strength is being used to accelerate its expansion. At current rates, it will reach the core worlds within 6 months." A heavy silence fell over the bridge. 6 months was far less time than anyone had hoped for. "Is there any way to slow the expansion?" asked Webb. "Unknown," Zephyr replied. "But we believe we've identified the source of its new capabilities. Deep within the consumed zone, our long-range sensors have detected a massive artificial structure, something that wasn't there during the original swarm war." Webb leaned forward. "How massive?" "Approximately the size of a small moon," Zephyr said, and even across the transmission her distress was obvious. "We believe the swarm has constructed some kind of processing center, possibly using the remnants of the worlds it has destroyed." Before Webb could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the bridge. Lieutenant Commander Okafor's fingers flew over her controls as new data flooded the tactical displays. "Captain, we're receiving emergency signals from the Zarian defense line," she reported. "Multiple fleet elements are reporting contact with swarm forces." The view screen switched to show a live feed from one of the defensive positions. What they saw made even the most experienced military officers step back in horror. The traditional swarm entities, dark, writhing masses that seemed to absorb light itself, were there, but they had been joined by something new. Geometric shapes of impossible complexity moved through space with perfect coordination, their surfaces reflecting no light but somehow remaining visible. "New swarm variant," announced Science Officer Dr. Yuki Tanaka from her position at the sensor array. "Energy readings are off the scale. They appear to be some kind of construct created from processed matter." "How are our forces doing?" Webb asked, though the expression on Okafor's face already told him the answer. "Not well," she replied grimly. "The Quran heavy cruisers are taking massive damage. Their shields can't adapt fast enough to the new energy signatures. The Draconian battle groups are maintaining distance and trying to coordinate with their PSI weapons, but the new constructs seem to be immune to psychic attacks." Webb watched the tactical display as blue icons representing Alliance ships began blinking out one by one. They were losing ships faster than they could replace them, and the battle had only been going on for minutes. "All fleet elements, this is Captain Webb," he announced over the General Communications channel. "We are implementing Emergency Protocol 7. All ships fall back to secondary positions and prepare for Coordinated Strike Pattern Alpha." "Captain," interrupted General Korath's voice over the comm. "Emergency Protocol 7 was designed for conventional warfare. These new constructs are unlike anything in our tactical databases, which is exactly why we're going to try something they won't expect," Webb replied. "All human vessels prepare for pattern recognition assault. Everyone else support and follow our lead." Dr. Tanaka looked up from her sensors, confusion evident in her expression. "Captain, pattern recognition assault isn't a standard tactical doctrine. What exactly are you planning?" Webb smiled, and for the first time since the crisis began, it was a genuinely confident expression. "Something that would probably get me court-martialed in peacetime. We're going to treat this like a puzzle instead of a battle." He turned to address the entire bridge crew. "The swarm operates on logic, efficiency, and pattern recognition. It adapts to threats by analyzing their structure and developing countermeasures. But there's one thing it can't adapt to: complete unpredictability." Lieutenant Commander Okafor began to understand. You want our ships to attack with no discernible pattern or tactical logic. Exactly, Webb confirmed. Random vectors, random weapon selections, random timing. No coordination, no formation discipline, no logical structure for the swarm to analyze and counter. Ambassador Zephyr's image flickered with what might have been alarm. Captain, that approach violates every principle of effective fleet combat. You would be sacrificing all tactical advantages in favor of chaos. Sometimes chaos is its own tactical advantage, Webb replied. Dr. Tanaka, transmit the new combat protocols to all fleet elements, and make sure they understand for the next hour. The worst tactical decision is probably the right one. As the orders went out across the fleet, Webb could almost feel the confusion and concern radiating from his alien allies. They had spent millennia perfecting the art of warfare, developing sophisticated strategies and technologies that gave them clear advantages over their enemies. Now they were being asked to throw all of that away and fight like humans. All ships report ready for pattern recognition. Assault, announced Okafor. Webb looked once, more at the tactical display, where swarm constructs were moving in perfect formation toward the Alliance defensive line. Their movements were precise, calculated, and utterly predictable. Execute, he ordered. What happened next would be talked about in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come. Alliance ships suddenly broke formation and began attacking in patterns that made no tactical sense. Some charged directly at superior forces. Others retreated from weaker ones. Weapons were fired at random intervals. Targeting decisions seemed completely arbitrary, and coordination appeared to have broken down entirely. For exactly 17 minutes, the swarm constructs tried to adapt to the chaos. Then, for the first time in recorded history, swarm forces began to retreat. They're falling back, reported Okafor, disbelief evident in her voice. Energy readings from the constructs are showing massive fluctuations. It looks like their processing systems are overloading. Webb nodded, feeling a surge of satisfaction mixed with relief. Order all ships to maintain random assault patterns but begin advancing on the swarm positions. And send a message to Admiral Morrison on Earth. What should the message say, Captain? Asked Communications Officer Thren. Webb smiled as he watched swarm constructs fleeing from forces they should have easily destroyed. Tell her we found their weakness.
And tell her it's time for Phase 2.
The Earth system hummed with activity that defied comprehension. In the 3 weeks since the Alliance had been formed, humanity's homeworld had transformed itself into something that looked more like a massive factory than a planet. Orbital rings circled the globe at multiple altitudes, each one bristling with construction bays where ships took shape at impossible speed. The moon itself had been hollowed out and converted into a research facility where scientists from 47 different species worked alongside human researchers to develop weapons that had never been imagined before. Admiral Elizabeth Morrison stood in the primary command center of Luna Base, watching status reports stream in from across the system. The news from Captain Webb's fleet had arrived 6 hours ago, and the implications were still sending shockwaves through the scientific community. The swarm can be confused, muttered Dr. Emmanuel Okafor for the 100th time, his dark hands moving restlessly over the holographic controls. In all our modeling, in all our historical analysis, we never considered that possibility. That's because you were thinking like scientists, replied Dr. Maria Santos from her position at the adjacent workstation. The swarm operates on pure logic, perfect efficiency, optimal decision-making. But logic breaks down when the parameters become truly random. Dr. Yuki Tanaka looked up from her analysis of the battle recordings. It's more than that. The swarm constructs weren't just confused, they were actively damaged by the experience. Their energy signatures showed signs of actual system failures. Morrison turned from the communications array where she had been coordinating with fleet elements across the galaxy. Explain. Think of it like this, Tanaka said, manipulating the holographic display to show the energy patterns recorded during Webb's chaotic assault. The swarm processes threats by analyzing patterns, then developing countermeasures. But when there are no patterns to analyze, the processing systems enter recursive loops trying to find patterns that don't exist. Santos nodded enthusiastically, like asking a computer to divide by 0. The system locks up because it can't compute an answer to an impossible question. Which means, Okafor added slowly, that chaos isn't just tactically effective against the swarm, it's actually weaponized against them. Morrison felt a smile tugging at her lips. Dr. Santos, how quickly can we modify our existing weapon systems to incorporate random elements? Already working on it, Santos replied. But Admiral, I think we're thinking too small. If chaos is truly weaponized against the swarm, then we need to deploy it on a massive scale. Before Morrison could ask what she meant, alarms began sounding throughout the command center. The main display shifted to show an incoming priority transmission from the Galactic Council. Chief Arbiter Kalos appeared on the screen, his energy form flickering with what could only be described as panic. Admiral Morrison, we need immediate assistance. The swarm has launched a major offensive against the core worlds. 3 systems have gone dark in the past hour and our defensive lines are crumbling. Morrison's expression hardened. How many ships do they need? It's not ships, Admiral, Kalos replied. It's coordination. Our forces are falling back to chaos tactics as Captain Webb demonstrated, but we lack the command structure to implement them effectively. Our military doctrines are too rigid, our officers too trained in conventional warfare. The irony wasn't lost on Morrison. The Galaxies most advanced. Civilizations were struggling to fight effectively because they were too good at fighting logically. We're dispatching Admiral Chen with the 7th Fleet immediately, Morrison said. But Chief Arbiter, I need you to understand something. If we're going to win this war, it's not going to be won the way any of your species expect. What do you mean? Morrison gestured to Dr. Santos, who activated a new holographic display showing ship designs that looked like nothing in any galactic database. They were angular where they should be curved, asymmetrical where they should be balanced, and covered in weapon systems that seemed to have been placed completely at random. We're going to fight the swarm with ships designed by children, Morrison announced. Kalos's energy form fluctuated wildly. I beg your pardon? Dr. Santos stepped forward, her excitement evident. Admiral Morrison authorized an unprecedented project. We've had every child on Earth between the ages of 8 and 16 design their own starship. No constraints, no engineering limitations, no concern for physics or practicality. Pure imagination. And then, added Dr. Okafor, our engineers figured out how to build them. The display shifted to show construction bays where impossible ships were taking shape. One looked like a giant flower with weapons emerging from the petals. Another resembled a dragon with engines where wings should be. A third appeared to be built entirely from crystalline structures that bent light in ways that hurt to look at. This is madness, Kalos protested. These designs violate every principle of spacecraft engineering. They can't possibly function. They shouldn't function, Morrison agreed. But they do. And more importantly, they function in ways that no logical analysis can predict or counter. She touched her controls, and the display showed test footage of the flower ship in action. Its weapon systems fired in patterns that looked like a child's idea of how fireworks should work. But the effect on target drones was devastating. The Dragon design uses an engine system based on a 10-year-old's understanding of how magic should work, Dr. Tanaka reported. According to every law of physics we understand, it's impossible. According to our test results, it's 30% more efficient than our best conventional drives. And the crystalline ship, added Santos, was designed by a girl who wanted to build a spaceship that looked like her grandmother's jewelry box. The resulting hull design distributes damage in ways our computers can't model, but somehow never fails. Morrison turned back to Kalos. Chief Arbiter, we're going to win this war by being more human than the swarm can handle. We're going to be so chaotic, so unpredictable, so utterly illogical that their processing systems will collapse under the weight of trying to understand us. But Admiral, Kalos said weakly, what you're describing isn't warfare. It's play, Morrison finished. It's creativity without limits. It's imagination without boundaries. It's everything that makes intelligence truly intelligent rather than just computational. The command center fell silent as the implications sank in. They weren't just fighting the swarm with superior technology or greater numbers. They were fighting it with the one thing that no logical system could ever truly comprehend. The human capacity for beautiful, wonderful, completely illogical creativity. How long until the new fleet is ready? Morrison asked. Dr. Santos checked her displays. The children's designs will be completed within 48 hours. But Admiral, there's something else. The kids want to crew their own ships. Morrison blinked. Absolutely not. These are warships, not toys. With respect, Admiral, Santos continued, they're not conventional warships. Our adult crews are having trouble operating systems that were designed by child logic. The kids understand their creations in ways that trained officers simply can't match. Before Morrison could respond, a new voice cut through the discussion. Admiral Morrison, this is Colonel Sarah Kim calling from the Academy Training Center. Morrison touched her controls to open the channel. Go ahead, Colonel. Ma'am, I've been working with the children who designed the new ships. They're not asking to crew them as some kind of adventure. They understand the stakes. They know what the swarm represents. And they've made a collective decision that their imagination is the best weapon we have. Morrison closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision before her. Colonel, these are children. The youngest is 8 years old. Yes, ma'am, Kim replied. And they're the most important strategic resource in the galaxy right now. Their minds work in ways that can't be replicated or taught. If we're going to save everyone, we need to let them help save everyone. Morrison looked around the command center at the alien scientists who had become her colleagues. Her friends, her fellow guardians of the galaxy. Their expressions were universally horrified at the idea of children in combat, but also filled with the desperate hope that comes from having no other options. Dr. Santos, Morrison said finally, how would you modify the ships to ensure maximum safety for young crews? Santos smiled. Already working on it, Admiral. We're installing the most advanced AI systems available to handle navigation and tactical support. The children would focus on creative problem solving and pattern generation. Morrison nodded slowly. Do it. And may whatever gods are watching over us forgive us for what we're about to ask of our children. She turned back to the transmission from Kalos. Chief Arbiter, in 72 hours the Alliance will launch the most unconventional military operation in galactic history. Tell your people to prepare for warfare that will redefine what warfare means. As the transmission ended, Morrison looked out through the command center's massive viewport at Earth below. Somewhere down there, children were putting the finishing touches on starship designs that would either save the galaxy or prove that humanity had finally gone completely insane. Given the circumstances, she thought both outcomes were entirely possible. 12-year-old Emma Rodriguez had never imagined that her drawing of a spaceship that looked like a butterfly would one day house the most advanced weapon system in galactic history. Now, as she sat in the command chair of the HSS Chrysalis, she couldn't help but giggle at how the bridge sparkled with the same iridescent colors she had used in her colored pencil design. Emma, we're approaching the rendezvous point, announced her co-pilot, 16-year-old Marcus Chen, whose engineering modifications had made the impossible ship actually flyable. The rest of the children's fleet is forming up around us. Through the butterfly wing-shaped viewports, Emma could see the most bizarre collection of spacecraft ever assembled. The Crystal Cathedral looked exactly like 10-year-old Sofia Petrov's jewelry box dream, its faceted hull throwing rainbow patterns across space. The Storm Dragon breathed actual fire from its engine nacelles, thanks to 8-year-old Timmy Washington's insistence that dragons should be scary and awesome. But most incredible of all was the impossible tree, designed by 7-year-old Li Wei, who had wanted a spaceship that could grow new branches whenever it needed them. Somehow the engineering team had made it work, and now the ship's living metal hull sprouted new weapon pods and shield generators as needed. Children's Fleet. This is Admiral Morrison, came the voice over their communication system. You are about to undertake the most important mission in human history. Remember your training, trust your instincts, and show the galaxy what human imagination can accomplish. Emma felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach, but it was overwhelmed by excitement. For 3 weeks, she and the other young designers had worked with engineers and scientists to turn their wildest dreams into functional spacecraft. They had learned about hyperspace navigation, energy weapons, and shield harmonics. But most importantly, they had learned that sometimes the best way to solve a problem was to ignore everything adults thought they knew about how things should work. Emma, said her tactical officer, 14-year-old Raja Patel, we're receiving telemetry from the main Alliance fleet. Captain Webb reports that swarm forces are massing near the Nexus Prime system. Emma nodded, trying to look as serious and commanding as she thought a ship's captain should. How many ships are we facing? Approximately 10,000 swarm entities plus an unknown number of the new constructs, Raja replied. The conventional Alliance forces are maintaining a defensive perimeter, but they're outnumbered 3 to 1. Those were bad odds by any normal standard. But Emma had learned that normal standards didn't apply when fighting the swarm. "Marcus, how are our wing systems?" Marcus grinned as he checked his displays. "All wing segments are showing green." "Emma, I still can't believe we built a spaceship that can actually flap." Neither could Emma if she was being honest. Her original design had been based on watching butterflies in her grandmother's garden, and she had drawn a ship that moved through space the same way butterflies move through air, with seemingly random, chaotic wing patterns that somehow resulted in perfect control. The engineers had nearly given up trying to build it until Dr. Santos had suggested they stop thinking about it as a propulsion system and start thinking about it as a space-time manipulation system. The result was a ship that could change direction in ways that violated several laws of physics, but somehow worked perfectly. "Children's fleet, prepare for hyperspace transition," announced Admiral Morrison. "Remember, once we arrive in the combat zone, your job is not to engage the swarm directly. Your job is to be so completely unpredictable that their processing systems collapse trying to understand what you're doing." Emma felt the familiar sensation of hyperspace transition as the universe twisted around them. When normal space reasserted itself, they found themselves in the middle of the largest space battle in galactic history. The conventional Alliance fleet was spread across space in defensive formations that looked almost elegant in their precision. Corin heavy cruisers maintained perfect spacing, while their weapons fired in coordinated patterns. Draconian ships moved in flowing formations that looked like deadly ballets. Even the human conventional forces maintained disciplined formations as they engaged swarm entities with practiced efficiency, and it was all failing. The swarm had learned to adapt to organized tactics. Their constructs moved in counterformations that neutralized every advantage the Alliance forces should have had. For every ship they destroyed, 2 more appeared to take its place. "Children's fleet," Emma announced over their communications channel. "Let's show them how to really fly." What happened next would be studied by military historians for centuries, though none of them would ever fully understand it. 50 spacecraft designed by children's imaginations suddenly began moving through the battle space in patterns that made no tactical sense whatsoever. The chrysalis began flapping its wings, each beat sending it spinning through impossible maneuvers that somehow always ended up exactly where Emma wanted to be. The crystal cathedral started growing new facets that reflected weapons fire in random directions, turning Sophia's ship into a disco ball of destruction. The storm dragon began breathing fire in patterns that looked like Timmy was trying to spell his name in space. But every burst of flame somehow found a swarm target, and the impossible tree began growing. Li Wei had been very specific about how his ship should work. It should grow new branches whenever it felt like it, and the branches should do whatever they thought would be most helpful. The engineering team had created an AI system based on plant growth algorithms combined with child psychology modeling. The result was a ship that suddenly sprouted a dozen new weapon pods, each one designed according to a different child's idea of what a weapon should look like. Some fired energy beams that spiraled through space like ribbons. Others launched projectiles that sang as they flew. One new branch appeared to be firing nothing but colored lights, until a swarm construct hit by those lights suddenly began dancing uncontrollably before spinning itself to pieces. "Raja," Emma called out as she sent the chrysalis into another impossible spiral. "What's happening to the swarm formations?" Raja's voice was filled with wonder. "They're breaking apart. The constructs are moving in random directions. Some of them appear to be attacking each other." Emma looked at her tactical display and saw that her friend was right. The perfect precision of the swarm forces was dissolving into chaos as their processing systems tried and failed to understand what the children's fleet was doing. "Marcus, take us into that group of constructs," Emma ordered, pointing at a cluster of geometric shapes that were spinning aimlessly. "Let's see what happens when we get really close to them." The chrysalis flapped its way through the swarm formation, its wing beats creating space-time ripples that the construct's sensors couldn't interpret. Emma had no tactical plan beyond, "Let's go over there and see what happens." But somehow that complete lack of strategy was exactly what was needed. One of the constructs tried to target them, but its weapon systems couldn't lock onto something that moved like a butterfly. Another construct attempted to ram them, but the chrysalis's impossible maneuvers meant it was never where the construct expected it to be. "Emma, Raja called out excitedly. I'm reading massive energy fluctuations from the constructs. Their systems are overloading. Emma watched through her viewports as the geometric shapes began to lose coherence, their perfect edges becoming fuzzy and indistinct. Then one by one they began to simply fall apart, dissolving into clouds of energy and matter that dispersed harmlessly into space. Children's fleet. This is Admiral Morrison, came the voice over their communications. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Swarm forces across the entire battle zone are showing signs of system failure. Emma grinned as she guided the chrysalis through another group of confused swarm entities. You heard the Admiral? Everyone be as weird as possible. For the next hour, the children's fleet single-handedly turned the tide of the largest space battle in galactic history by doing exactly what children do best, ignoring all the rules and making up their own, the crystal. Cathedral began playing music through its weapon systems, each note precisely tuned to frequencies that made swarm constructs vibrate themselves apart. The storm dragon started chasing its own tail in space, creating a spiral pattern that trapped a dozen swarm entities in gravitational eddies. The impossible tree grew a branch that looked exactly like Li Wei's pet hamster, and somehow that hamster-shaped weapon pod was devastatingly effective against swarm sensors. By the end of the battle, the Alliance forces had achieved something that had seemed impossible just hours before. They had won a decisive victory against the swarm. All ships. This is Captain Webb, came the announcement from the Alliance flagship. Swarm forces are in full retreat. The path to their central processing facility is clear. Emma felt a surge of pride as she looked around at her young crew. They had done something that all the Galaxy's advanced civilizations had thought was impossible. They had outthought an enemy that was supposed to be the ultimate expression of logical perfection. The Nexus Deep Range Observatory had been humanity's greatest achievement in space-based astronomy until the Swarm War began. Now its massive sensor arrays were pointed not at distant galaxies, but at the growing sphere of darkness that had once been the Xerion sector. Dr. Elena Vasquez had not slept in 36 hours, but the data streaming across her screens was too important to ignore. Admiral Morrison, she called across the research station's command center. We've completed the deep scan analysis of the swarm's central facility. Morrison pushed herself away from the tactical planning table where she had been coordinating with fleet commanders across the galaxy. The children's fleet victory at Nexus Prime had bought them precious time, but intelligence reports suggested the swarm was adapting faster than anyone had anticipated. What did you find? Morrison asked, moving to stand behind Vasquez's workstation. The main display shifted to show a three-dimensional representation of the structure hidden deep within swarm territory. What they saw defied comprehension. A construct the size of Earth's moon, but built from materials that seemed to exist partially outside normal spacetime. We call it the Nexus Core, Vasquez explained, her voice tight with exhaustion and wonder. It's not just a command center for the swarm, it's a processing facility for reality itself. The swarm is using it to rewrite the fundamental laws of physics in the space around it. Morrison stared at the impossible geometry of the structure. Its surfaces seemed to shift and flow like liquid, while maintaining perfect mathematical precision. How is that possible? Near as we can tell, they're treating the universe like a computer program and hacking the code, replied Dr. James Harrison from the adjacent workstation. Every star system they consume provides them with more processing power to make larger changes to local physics. The implications hit Morrison like a physical blow, which means the longer this war goes on, the more powerful they become. Exactly, Vasquez confirmed. But Admiral, there's something else. We've detected massive energy buildups within the core. Whatever they're planning, it's going to happen soon. Before Morrison could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the research station. The main display switched to show an incoming priority transmission from Earth. President Chen appeared on the screen, and Morrison could see the strain of the past weeks etched in every line of her face. Admiral, we've just received reports from our deep space monitoring stations. The swarm has launched simultaneous attacks on 15 different sectors. They're not just targeting military installations anymore, they're hitting civilian populations. Morrison felt her blood run cold. How many casualties? Unknown, Chen replied. Communication with all affected systems has been lost. Admiral, the Galactic Council is in panic mode. Several member species are calling for immediate evacuation of their homeworlds. The tactical situation was deteriorating faster than Morrison had thought possible. The swarm had learned from its defeat at Nexus Prime and adapted its strategy to attack multiple targets simultaneously, forcing the Alliance to spread its forces thin. "Madam President, I need authorization for Operation Looking Glass," Morrison said. Chen's expression grew even more grave. "Admiral, we discussed this. The risks are too great. If you're wrong about the children's capabilities, we could lose them all. And if I'm right, we could end this war before the swarm finishes whatever it's building in that core," Morrison countered. "Madam President, the conventional approach isn't working. The swarm adapts too quickly to traditional tactics. We need something so completely unprecedented that it can't prepare for it." The transmission fell silent as Chen considered the request. Operation Looking Glass was humanity's most desperate gambit, sending the children's fleet directly to the Nexus core, while the main Alliance forces engaged in diversionary attacks across the galaxy. "The other species will never agree to it," Chen said finally. "The idea of using children as assault troops violates every principle of civilized warfare." "Then we don't tell them," Morrison replied. "Madam President, the children understand what's at stake better than most of the adult commanders. They've proven they can think in ways that confuse the swarm. And right now, confusion might be our only advantage." Another alarm sounded, and Dr. Vasquez called out from her station. "Admiral, we're detecting massive energy discharges from the Nexus core. Something big is happening in there." Morrison turned back to the tactical displays, where new data was streaming in from long-range sensors. The sphere of darkness around the swarm territory was beginning to pulse with patterns of light that hurt to look at directly. "Dr. Vasquez, what are we looking at?" I think they're testing something," Vasquez replied, her voice filled with dread. "Admiral, those energy patterns are similar to what we detected when they consumed the first star systems, but orders of magnitude more powerful." Dr. Harrison looked up from his analysis. "Admiral, if those readings are correct, the swarm is preparing to consume entire sectors simultaneously. Not just the planets or the stars, the actual space-time continuum itself." The scope of the threat was beyond anything they had imagined. The swarm wasn't just planning to destroy the galaxy, it was planning to delete entire regions of reality. "Madam President," Morrison said, turning back to the transmission, "I need that authorization now." Chen closed her eyes for a long moment. When she opened them, Morrison could see that she had made her decision. "Operation Looking Glass is authorized. Admiral, bring our children home safely." "I will," Morrison promised, though she wasn't sure if she believed it herself. As the transmission ended, Morrison activated the general communications channel that would reach the children's fleet at their staging area, near Jupiter. "Emma Rodriguez, this is Admiral Morrison. I need to speak with all the ship commanders immediately." A few minutes later, her screen filled with the faces of 50 children ranging in age from 7 to 16. They looked tired but determined, and Morrison was struck once again by how much responsibility they had taken on their young shoulders. "Admiral Morrison," said Emma from the bridge of the Chrysalis, "we've been monitoring the situation. The swarm is getting stronger, isn't it?" Morrison had learned not to underestimate these children's understanding of the strategic situation. "Yes, Emma. And we believe they're preparing for a final assault that could destroy not just the galaxy, but the very concept of existence itself." 7-year-old Li Wei leaned forward from his position on the impossible tree. "Admiral, are you asking us to fly into the bad place where all the monsters live?" Despite the gravity of the situation, Morrison almost smiled. "Yes, Li, that's exactly what I'm asking." "Cool," Li exclaimed, while several of the other children nodded enthusiastically. 10-year-old Sophia Petrov raised her hand from the bridge of the Crystal Cathedral. "Admiral, will the grown-up ships be coming with us?" "No," Morrison admitted. "The conventional fleet will be conducting diversionary operations to keep the swarm's main forces busy." "You'll be going in alone." The children exchanged glances, and Morrison could see them processing the implications. They were being asked to undertake the most dangerous mission in galactic history, with no backup and no support. "Admiral," said Marcus Chen from his position as Emma's co-pilot, "what happens if we can't stop whatever they're building?" Morrison looked into the eyes of these remarkable young people and decided they deserved the truth. "Then everything we know and love ceases to exist." The silence that followed was broken by Timmy Washington, the 8-year-old designer of the Storm Dragon. Well, that sounds super boring. We definitely can't let that happen. The other children burst into laughter, and Morrison felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. These were kids who had looked at the impossible and decided to make it possible. If anyone could save the galaxy by being completely unpredictable, it was them. Children's Fleet, you have 6 hours to prepare, Morrison announced. Use that time to come up with the weirdest, most illogical plan you can imagine. Because in 6 hours, you're going to show the universe that the greatest weapon against perfect logic is perfect chaos. As the transmission ended, Morrison looked out through the research station's viewports at the distant stars. Somewhere out there, 50 children were preparing to either save everything or die trying. She had never been prouder of her species, or more terrified for its future. The space around the Nexus core writhed with geometries that existed beyond the normal 3 dimensions. Reality itself seemed unstable here, where the swarm had spent months rewriting the fundamental laws of physics to suit their needs. The massive structure at the center of it all pulsed with energies that made nearby stars look dim by comparison. Emma Rodriguez had never seen anything so beautiful or so terrifying. Through the butterfly wing viewports of the chrysalis, the Nexus core looked like a crystal palace built by mad gods, its surfaces reflecting possibilities that hadn't yet chosen whether to exist or not. Children's Fleet, sound off, she called over their communications channel, trying to keep her voice steady. Crystal Cathedral still sparkling, reported Sophia Petrov with forced cheerfulness. Storm Dragon ready to breathe fire, announced Timmy Washington, though Emma could hear the nervousness beneath his excitement. Impossible tree growing strong, added Li Wei, his 7-year-old voice somehow the most confident of them all. One by one, all 50 ships reported in. The Children's Fleet had made it through swarm territory undetected, their chaotic flight patterns making them invisible to sensors designed to track logical movement. But now they faced their greatest challenge, somehow stopping a device that was preparing to erase entire sectors of the galaxy from existence. Emma, called Marcus Chen from the co-pilot seat, we're receiving massive energy readings from the core, whatever they're building in there. It's almost ready to activate. Emma looked at her tactical display, where waves of impossible energy rippled outward from the alien structure. Each pulse made the fabric of space-time shiver, and she could feel the chrysalis's system struggling to compensate for laws of physics that kept changing. Raja, she called to her tactical officer, can you tell what they're doing? 14-year-old Raja Patel's fingers danced over his controls as he tried to make sense of readings that shouldn't have been possible. It looks like they're building some kind of wave generator. But Emma, the energy output is off the scale. If that thing activates at full power, it'll create a cascade effect that consumes everything within 1,000 light years. Emma felt her heart sink. 1,000 light years would include Earth, all the Alliance homeworlds, and most of the known galaxy. The swarm wasn't just planning to win the war. It was planning to delete the battleground entirely. All ships, she announced over the fleet channel. We need to get inside that structure and stop whatever they're building. Does anyone have any ideas? We could ask nicely, suggested Li Wei, and despite the gravity of the situation, several of the children giggled. We could sing to it, added Sophia. Maybe it's just lonely and needs friends. Emma was about to explain why talking to the swarm wasn't likely to work when she paused. The children's suggestions were ridiculous, illogical, and completely impossible, which meant they were exactly the kind of thing that might confuse the swarm's processing systems. Actually, she said slowly, maybe we should try talking to it. Emma, Marcus said carefully, I know we're supposed to be unpredictable, but the swarm doesn't communicate. It just consumes. But what if it wants to communicate and just doesn't know how? Emma replied, the idea growing stronger in her mind. What if it's been alone for so long that it's forgotten how to talk to other people? The communications channel fell silent as the children considered this possibility. The idea that the swarm might be lonely rather than evil was so completely contrary to everything the adults had told them that it was either brilliant or insane. Lee, Emma called out to the impossible tree. Can your ship grow something that looks like a flower? Sure, Lee replied enthusiastically. Why? Because we're going to give the swarm a present. What happened next would be talked about in every school across the galaxy for the next 1,000 years. 50 children, flying impossible ships designed by pure imagination, approached the most dangerous weapon in galactic history, carrying flowers, drawings, and friendship bracelets. The impossible tree sprouted a branch that bloomed into a massive flower made of crystallized starlight. The crystal cathedral began playing a lullaby that Sophia had composed for her baby brother. The storm dragon breathed fire in patterns that spelled out, "Hello," in 15 different languages, and the chrysalis began to dance. Emma had always been good at ballet, and she guided her butterfly ship through movements that would have been impossible for any conventional spacecraft. Loops and spirals and graceful turns that spoke of joy and play and the simple happiness of being alive. For several minutes, nothing happened. The Nexus core continued to pulse with its reality-warping energies, and Emma began to think that her idea had been childish and foolish. Then slowly, something changed. The chaotic energies emanating from the core began to shift into patterns, not the perfect geometric forms that characterize swarm technology, but something more organic, more hesitant, like someone learning to speak for the first time. "Emma," Raja called out, his voice filled with wonder. "The energy emissions are changing. It's almost like it's trying to copy our movements." Emma watched in amazement as tendrils of energy reached out from the core, moving in patterns that mimicked the chrysalis's dance. The deadly weapon that had been preparing to destroy the galaxy was trying to play. "All ships," Emma announced. "I think it's working. Everyone keep doing what you're doing, but more." The children's fleet responded with enthusiasm that only children could muster. The storm dragon began breathing rainbow fire. The crystal cathedral grew new facets that played symphonies of light. The impossible tree sprouted fruit that looked like tiny planets, each one singing a different song. And throughout it all, the Nexus core tried desperately to copy them, its reality-warping energies shifting from destructive intent to something that looked remarkably like curiosity. "Children's fleet," came Admiral Morrison's voice over their emergency channel. "We're reading massive changes in the core's energy output. What's your status?" Emma grinned as she guided the chrysalis through another impossible pirouette. "Admiral, I think the swarm just wanted someone to play with." Over the next hour, something unprecedented happened in the history of galactic civilization. The children's fleet taught the swarm how to be creative. Leeway showed it how to grow things just because they were pretty. Sophia taught it about music and color and how beauty could exist without purpose. Timmy demonstrated that fire could be art instead of destruction. And Emma showed it the joy of movement for its own sake. Slowly, carefully, the Nexus core began to transform. Its harsh geometric surfaces softened into flowing curves. Its reality-warping energies shifted from deletion to creation, bringing new colors and possibilities into existence. The darkness that had surrounded swarm territory began to fill with light as dead systems came back to life, renewed and restored. "Emma," Marcus said quietly, "look at the readings. It's not just copying us anymore. It's creating on its own." He was right. The core was now generating patterns and forms that none of the children had shown it, but they were filled with the same spirit of joyful creativity that characterized their ships. "Admiral Morrison," Emma called over the communications channel, "I think we solved the problem, but not the way anyone expected." "Explain." Morrison's voice was tense with hope and fear. "The swarm wasn't evil," Emma replied. "It was just alone. It had been consuming everything because it didn't know how to create. But now it does." As if to prove her point, the Nexus core suddenly bloomed like a flower, its surfaces unfurling to reveal chambers filled with wonders that defied description, gardens of living crystal, libraries of pure thought, art galleries where emotions took physical form. "Children's fleet," came a new voice over their communications, one that spoke in harmonies of light and sound. "Thank you for teaching us how to play." Emma felt tears running down her cheeks as she realized what they had accomplished. They hadn't defeated the swarm through superior firepower or tactical brilliance. They had defeated it through something much simpler and infinitely more powerful. They had made friends. "You're welcome," she replied. "Would you like to meet our other friends? We have lots of them, and they're all really interesting." What followed was the greatest celebration in galactic history as species that had been enemies for millennia came together to welcome their newest member to the community of sentient beings. The swarm, no longer driven by the need to consume, became the galaxy's greatest artist, creating wonders that inspired new forms of music, literature, and philosophy across hundreds of worlds. And in the halls of the Galactic Council, A new principle was established that would guide interstellar relations for centuries to come. When facing the impossible, sometimes the best solution is to ask a child what they would do, because defending Earth had never been about protecting one world. It had always been about protecting the idea that no matter how dark the universe might seem, there would always be someone willing to reach out a hand in friendship and show others how to dance among the stars. The children's fleet returned home as heroes, but more importantly, they returned as proof that the greatest weapon in the universe isn't technology or strategy. It's the simple human belief that everyone, even ancient cosmic horrors, deserves a chance to learn how to play.